I had a dream last night. At least I think it was a dream. Um, when I just thought about how I phrased that. Uh, I think it was a dream because I can't imagine actually having had this conversation in real life. And it is about so much more that about what's going on. It could have happened that I heard this on something that I watched or was listening to at some point um, yesterday, but it came up to me again this morning that um, there was a conversation being had about the state of the world right now. And I don't need to get into all the specifics. I think just the fact that there seems to be a never ending supply of dumpster fires happening, and a lot of them are being set off by extreme arsonists, to say, like, in an allegorical sense. Anyways, and there was this concept that my husband and I have talked about this quite a lot. And I remember it standing out because it was like, oh, I've thought of that forever. So I've, not forever, but for years. And which makes me think that maybe I actually overheard the conversation rather than it being just in my dream. It was talking about how to move the needle forward, to how to get people together behind a movement, an idea about working towards rights for all, rights for everyone, rights for more people. And in my mind, that is, the right to life, the right to health, the right to um, livelihood, the right to passion, the right to love, the right to one's own sexuality and gender. And and encompassing all of that is the right that no one can ever take away, which is our right to freedom, because we all have the freedom to make choices. And then my mind went to this like locked up little cage, and how many lives are done like that. As an ethical vegan, that of course is the first thing that I think of in that cage is an animal. But like usually, but right now I'm thinking of a person and people who are, that is how they have actually had their right to movement taken away. But they still have the right over their mind. They still have the right they still have freedom in their mind, and how they can work on accepting that or not. And that's very Viktor Frankl. Like, I'm not the first one to say that or to think that. It is radical freedom, and the ability for you to have that. That wasn't what the conversation was about, though. That's just me on a stream of consciousness sharing my inner dialogue. Within the conversation, it was talking about providing a better option. So it's not just about fighting. It's not just about arguing about what is right and what is wrong. It's not just about like proving me wrong. And if you get that, then you know what I'm referring to, which is a tragedy and something that is really terrible and scary. And the fact that we're making it into such a big deal is more of an example of how narrow-minded our idea of the world is, our sense of the world is. Anyways, that's another tangent. Whenever we are trying to persuade a large group of people to do something, we have to give them two choices. There has to be the one that we all want, as well as what we usually start off with is the threat. Or what I feel like is too often started out with is this threat. You know, like follow the law or you will be locked up. I even have this memory of my daughter when she was younger. We have always stressed, like, this is the crosswalk. We walk between these lines, and that is the safe place for us to walk. And I know that it isn't. There was a tragic accident 14 months ago where that wasn't. And I've always encouraged my children above that to look at the driver's eyes and before crossing, and to be aware. Where whenever you are going into a street, be aware. And my kids are great with that. I was so worried about them last summer, and this summer I know that they are. They're just aware of it. But a big stress for my daughter, and something that she could understand last summer, was we cross at the crosswalk. We have to stay in between these lines. And one day she was crossing with me and we got across the street and she was like, Mom, I went outside of the line and I didn't get hit by a car. And I laughed and I thought it was really funny, because here is my daughter trying to break a rule, and she is not a rule breaker. She loves structure. She loves rules. And so that's awesome. That's great. It was hilarious. But this is the threat. We keep everybody in between those white lines with a threat. We make everybody go our way by threatening. Oh, if you do A, B is going to happen. That's just how it is. So do C instead. C is what has to happen. But what if C had a better consequence? What if C was what was encouraging us? And that, I think, is the difference in what is reported in the news and the reality of how proper negotiation happens. Not in the art of war or anything like that. That is ridiculous and stupid and just about a power struggle. Actually, I haven't read The Art of War. I just know that that is a big, topic right now about how I can be the best negotiator ever. No, you can't. You aren't the best negotiator ever. You're a bully by saying, I'm just going to do this. I have this power in my hands, and if this doesn't happen, if you don't stay in those lines, a vehicle will hit you. There is an alternative. That if you are aware of the driver, aware of the driver's attention, you can ensure that you won't get hit. If you are aware of the driver's attention, you can reach their sense of humanity, and they'll recognize that they don't want to hit you. If you live in a community where there aren't cars and vehicles and everything going by constantly, you won't have to worry about that. That's not going to hurt. It's not going to get you. And that is how it should go in negotiations. That if you have, here is the first plan, which is the threat, and here is the next plan, which is an incentive. And I think about this a lot with parenting, especially in parenting a child with complex ADHD and anxiety, is that I always want to start with the incentive. I never actually want to offer the threat. And then, but it happens that the threat comes up because I've just hit the end of my rope, and that is too often what we think of. But it's I've gotten better with my daughter about that, the second child. Um, my first child, I feel like I threaten too often. He gets threatened too often. He gets told to stay in the lines or something will be taken away from him. And that bothers me because I know it would be a whole lot better if we said, stay in these lines and you'll get a hug at the end. Stay in these lines and I'll walk with you. Stay in these lines and you can create this masterpiece. We can make time for this. We can do that. We can, yeah, whatever incentive he needs. I've never really wanted the incentive to be about food because I know that's a delicate issue. I want to talk more about that specifically outside of this video, but I have been able to use that with my daughter. And because I'm a stronger parent the second time around, and she is a different person. She has gone through different things. Her anxiety was not as impacted by COVID and the lockdown as my oldest. So it's hard. But the dream wasn't really about parenting. I'm just making all these connections, spewing these connections out. Man, okay, growing up, we used to have a saying of like, oh, I think the train jumped track. And so in my mind, I created this idea of all these thoughts being on trains, like the train of thought, right? And a lot of the times when I was speaking, I would jump onto a different train and then forget which train I was on. And that is how my brain works. Now that I have a diagnosis, it's like, oh, that makes sense. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. I can be on one train, but there are 6 leaving the station. And we're going to come across 3 more on the way. And maybe I'm going to see, well, I'm explaining that first train. Oh, I'm going to see another one right over there, and I'm going to jump on it, and I'm going to go back to the station for a little bit. And then I'm going to have to catch that train again to get to the end of the story. And if you've seen my critiquing the critic, that definitely came out of my writing in university of, oh, you seem to be getting to the point by the end of the paper, but until then you're going in circles and circles and circles. Yeah, because there was a different train over there and I had to jump onto it. And there were 6 trains that were leaving at the same time. And train number 1 might have been where we started, but train number 5 had a lot more room and I could like run around a whole lot more on that train. So I did. And I forgot about where train 1 was because train number 5 was actually going much slower because there was so much more room on it to explore. I hope you have that image in your mind or at least can understand it. I know not everybody sees images in their mind. It's just so fantastic that we are so different. And maybe that's the point too of having an incentive and negotiating and working towards something, is that you have to understand what's going to motivate the other side. You can't just put yourself into that position. I was listening to a podcast about love languages yesterday, and it was so awesome. I've known about love languages for at least 20 years. And they, when I first read them and tried to understand them, it was like all about me. And I remember my sister being like, yeah, but maybe you can also think about how other people are showing you their love through a different language. And I was like, yes, but can't it also just be about me? I think that is what like really pissed me off about that, is that no, like this is about, yeah, this is a great and wonderful thing that I realized, like something that in your early 20s that you get to do is like, oh, that's me. I get to discover that. And maybe that's my entire life, is about discovering who I am. But she was right. Love languages help us understand other people too. So if somebody is always showering us with gifts, that's how they show their love. And a great way to show your love back is to give them a gift as well. If someone is always doing things or offering to do things for you, that's their love language. And so if you want to show your love back, do that back. When you're getting into grand negotiations, though, like, you have to be willing to listen to the other side. And that's where it's not about proving me wrong. It's about, tell me your side. And I want that to be what gets us together. That should be what binds us to one another and brings us all together. So when we're working out a problem, I want both sides to come in and say, what do you want? And none of this BS negotiating tactics of, oh, I'm going to wait and see what you can offer me because I'm not quite sure. No, I think you need to come in and have an open mind and know that, like, not everything that you're saying is going to be taken at that value. Come up with that utopia. Let us dream. Let us imagine a world where we all win, rather than a world where we're struggling for power and running from threats, and all of our anxiety is building up and it's just overwhelming us. In the dream, the way it was explained was, yes, you can have all the threats, but you also need that vision for the future, that alternative for the future that the other side wants more than the threat. And somebody spoke up. They said, oh, like Malcolm X. And I really think it was a dream. I don't think this is a conversation, because my husband uses this to explain this, like, how movements operate. And anytime that I was talking about the vegan movement and animal rights movement, he would be like, you need to have the threat. Not just the option. And that sucks, because I worked so hard at creating that option of, like, being that invitation and being like, hey, this is a world that we can do. This is a world where we have all these beautiful options. And they were what I wanted. They were things that had brought me over to it. And I just hoped and I thought that other people would want those too. And he explained that, you know, in the civil rights movement, you would have Martin Luther King Jr. talking about this world that he envisioned, where we could all get along, where our lives were not defined by our race or class or gender. I'm not even sure if he touched on all of those things, but he presented this wonderful option for everybody, that this is what we all want. This is what we want. And society could only listen to Martin Luther King Jr. because the alternative was the threat from the Black Panthers. And that's Malcolm X. And so I think right now, maybe this is what the dream was teaching me, or the conversation I overheard, or whatever, wherever this idea came from, that right now we hear the threat. We're terrified. We have been on the verge of World War III for like 24 years, really, honestly. Like, yesterday was the 24th anniversary of 9/11. That has defined my adulthood. Like, I was in grade 10. I was old enough to know how much the world changed. Now I think about my kids, and like, COVID was the most recent one where the world changed again, right? So they're not going to know the world before that, really. They were too young. So I tell them so many stories. I tell them as many stories as I can, so they have this idea of a beautiful world beforehand, a beautiful world from my past. And I also tell them stories of us together and the beautiful world that we live in, this great existence that we can have. And maybe when we plan for the future, when we dream, that too is it. Because if we dream about the threats, we're creating a nightmare. When we listen to the threat of the future, that's a nightmare. It's not a dream. Maybe we need it to keep some people in line, to illustrate to some people empathy, you know? Like, yeah, you could have this. You think you have more power over me, but understand too that I have the ability to do this, to create this dystopia. What I want to work towards is a utopia. I guess that's just my thoughts for today. I'm going to post this unedited because I'm still I know I'm not going to get to 40 videos before 40, but I'm going to try to see how many I can get to. If I get to 16, that would be awesome. I have some editing to do. And there's somebody who would like to be in the video here too. There's been a couple of black four-legged creatures trying to get into it. And yeah. So, thank you for listening. I do talk a lot. Sometimes it's just to clear out my thoughts. Maybe sometimes it's inspiring and it helps you think of those thoughts. Whether I had a dream or this was just some random thoughts occurring in my consciousness when I was awake, I am happy to have shared that with you. And thank you so much for listening while I talk a lot.